Next Curve.
Welcome to another episode of Next Curve's Rethink podcast, where tech industry thought leaders discuss the trends and the technologies that are shaping our digital future. I'm Leonard Lee, Managing Director and founder of Next Curve. And today, I'm really happy to welcome back Chris Pearson, President of 5G Americas. Great to have you again, Chris. You're looking good.
Thanks. Great to be back, and always a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you. And, why don't you remind our audience, you have been here before. We talked about COVID last time, but we're going to talk about something a little bit different this time. But why don't you remind our audience a little bit about yourself as well as what 5G Americas does?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the president of 5G Americas and been in telecom my entire working career and been in wireless, most all of that. So 5G Americas is an industry association, and we are dedicated to progressing mobile wireless communications throughout the Americas. So that's North, Central, and South America, Latin America. And we work on three major areas. We work on technical recommendations and technical facilitation. So that means, there's some really big, broad standards out there, and we got to get everyone on the same page. We got to get everything progressing in the right direction to understand that. So we're very famous for our white papers that are sometimes a little bit too long, but they are white papers that will really kind of give out our viewpoints and recommendations of what we want to do and where the industry should be going. The second area we work on is regulatory policy recommendations. So we do regulatory policy recommendations on things like spectrum, what we should be doing as far as what the industry needs from governments to move things forward, like streamlining cell site processes, all those types of range of activities. And the third thing that we do is work together to educate all the wireless key stakeholders. And that's this is a growing area with 5G, but to get all the key stakeholders to really understand our technology, where it is today and where it's going. And the association, you get more information, at our website of 5gamericas.org, but we consist of both operators and vendors together as equal partners within this kind of umbrella association to work together and to move things forward. So you'll see lots of leading mobile wireless companies in that list.
I wouldn't characterize your white papers as being too long. I would call them comprehensive and actually very thought-leading in a lot of ways, because you have so many of the industry participants really chipping in and trying to set some direction for this technology and how it's being applied in the comms sector in all the different markets that you play in, right?
Yeah, thanks. That was a little self-deprecating. Yeah. Literally, if I go anywhere in the world and I can be talking to a leading wireless executive or anybody just walking down a conference floor, when they find out with 5G America, it's like, oh man, your white paper on this subject was great, or what you've done. So yeah, we're pretty proud of those white papers and think that they are really a key part of our industry that we all live and enjoy.
And I share them quite frequently with folks that I meet who want to find out about things such as the topic we're going to talk about today, which is edge computing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so we're going to talk about it in relations to 5G. I think that's the important thing because, arguably, edge computing is nothing new. It's been around for quite some time. In fact, with CDNs, they've been doing with distributing content on the internet for, I think at least 20 years. And depending on the domain that someone's in, edge computing is familiar, quite frankly, even though I think in the context of 5G, it's become something a little bit more exciting than what it was in the past, right? And so on this podcast, what we're going to be talking about are four things. Number one, edge computing in the 5G era, what does that mean? And I think that's a really important question. And you have a white paper that does a really great job of explaining that. Real quick plug.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing that we really want to do here is get people really straight on what MEC is, or multi-access edge computing, versus edge cloud versus telco cloud. Because I think there's a lot of confusion, or at least semantic challenges and conceptual challenges there. So we'll take a moment to talk about that. And then we'll talk about some of the levers that we see for 5G edge computing driven innovation. And I know that you've been working with a lot of the operators as well as tech vendors, as you mentioned. And I'm sure that you've heard their opining about where they think the puck is going to go with innovation around edge computing. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we're going to wrap things up by sharing some observations on how the priorities are evolving around 5G edge in the telco industry. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be in particular interested in some of the thoughts and your observations there, Chris. So let's talk about edge computing in the 5G era and what that means.
And I think the audience got to hear from you too. You're an expert.
I will. But you know what? I have a big mouth.
And I definitely want to hear your thoughts too. So when you think about 5G and edge computing, so there's a lot of factors and what I would say technology enablers that are basically circling around with 5G as both enabling technology and also being enabled by others. And so I also almost look like 5G is kind of this glue for lots of things that are going to be extremely important in how we live, work, and play in the future. If you start to think about 5G and edge computing, okay, so edge computing, how do we, basically take really the computing power and make it actually closer to the customer, say in the 5G cellular environment? Then you get much more faster interactions. And so that's actually something that's needed not just for the computing power that's on the edge, because that's important, but actually the technology of 5G that needs to really supply the data throughput and actually the lower latency so that we can have this interaction between edge computing and whether it's a machine or whether it is a smartphone, whether it's a manufacturing process, whether it's a car going down the freeway and needing to stop quickly. What edge computing to me, coupled with 5G, is it actually is bringing that computer power up closer out to, again, whatever it might be utilized in communications. But at the same time, 5G is needed with some of the great network architecture innovations that we've done to have lower latency and higher throughput. So all this can work together more closely.
I think one of the important things to keep in mind as we think about edge computing as it relates to 5G is the mobile aspect, and that the wireless connections are inherently wrought with latency. You have these specific challenges that are beyond what you would typically see with wireline or even fiber. And so connecting things wirelessly, architecturally, and technically is very challenging. And so it is important to bring computing as close to the RAN as possible, quite honestly, for certain types of URLLC or low latency applications. Without it, this stuff is almost impossible. You just cannot go from the user equipment or the endpoint device and then have calls made all the way to a hyperscale data center and then expect it to come back less than 5 milliseconds. Is just not going to happen. And I think that's really the important thing, because I have fiber to the home today. Latency is awesome, but it's wired. My computer right now, I look as clear as I do right now, I think. Because
looking good.
I mean, it's like a fiber line going directly into the back of my computer. But when we go wireless, it's a different story. And so I think that's really the big thing about 5G, that this new wireless technology enables these new architectures and infrastructure designs that can support that fiber-like connectivity, hence these much lower latencies as you're thinking about building these very responsive real-time systems.
And then
whether it's an autonomous vehicle or whatever, all those use cases out there that people talk about.
I think 3GPP, which is a standard, organization that's basically done a really good job of bringing everyone to put together this network architecture that allows us the flexibility. The flexibility is just one piece of it. It's really a great master plan of that network architecture. But on top of that, now you need these technology enablement and again, through 5G enabling, but also these other technologies to enable 5G to really get to the promise that it needs. the services and applications that you start to look at, and you alluded to on V2X, or whether it's the assisted driver or automatic driving or assisted driving, V2X, or a lot of different applications, but you're going to need low latency, you're going to need high throughput. There's so many factors that you're going to need, and you're going to need much more computing power closer, because that vehicle then, it really becomes, in a sense, a really smart computer, traveling down the road, whether it's 20 miles per hour in the city or 60 miles per hour down the freeway, and you're trying to interact real time with it. You have to have kind of the whole package together.
Right.
And that whole package, though, I think we should be tipping our caps to everybody at 3GPP in the industry that came together there to say, this is the architecture that we're going to need. Right now, I mean, if you look at where we're at with 5G, since again, you're trying to look at 5G and edge, I mean, we're really in the beginning stages. I mean, it's baseball season. Baseball is typically a 9-inning game. I mean, we're still probably first or second inning of what we can really get to with 5G as far as the services and applications. But for that to happen, it all needs to come together. It's like, you're playing a baseball game, and I'm the manager of your team, and I'm like, we got a great team, but we only got a shortstop, a pitcher, 3 outfielders. Well, what about the catcher? He's not there today. You're not going to get very far in the game. But as you get to bring everything together, with edge computing being one of these things,
right?
And then 5G, again, starting to continue to improve as well, then you start to bring the whole package together. But we probably are in that early. I mean, we're maybe second inning. Second inning, yeah. Of a 9-inning game, depending on the region, you might even still be just in the first inning. But other regions might be a little bit in the third inning. Right. But a lot of kind of the average for the world would be, average for the world, we're probably in the second inning. We're at 105 commercial deployments worldwide, but that's probably second inning.
You're making a great point, and it's important for folks to understand that 5G is an evolution. It's a generational thing, but you don't get all the promised benefits at the beginning, right? What you do is you get the hurdle that you have to jump over, that high jump that gets set for you to leap over. And I think one of the really important points for folks to understand, especially with what's happening with the releases, is with release 16, this is really the first inning of URLLC, right? This is where we're starting to see the first set of standards being set for a lot of these URLLC technologies that need to now then become commercialized. And then now you start to see these applications that get built based on these technologies, and then you see the benefit, right? It doesn't happen just because in release 16 or a more exciting one for URLLC is going to be a 17. It doesn't necessarily mean all that stuff happens. All those benefits happen when the standard gets set, right?
Yeah, but release 16, as you say, is a key step for low latency applications and services. I mean, we've done a great job, I think, with LTE continuing to move things along. And then as you get to, standalone deployment, and then you get to release 16, you really start to see some for the 5G lower latency capabilities, and then obviously the application services that can support. That starts coming into play. Just like it's been great to see in many parts of the world, the standalone, deployments, because that's a big factor in the lower latency, again, applications and services.
Right.
So it's all in an innovation and improvement cycle right now. But again, just in the beginning stages, 3GPP puts something out, and now it's like everyone's got to, from the, it's not just the operators, you got to start with the vendors that are developing the equipment and the devices and everything to take advantage of what's basically on a piece of paper at 3GPP.
Right. Well, things like end-to-end network slicing, time-sensitive networking, all those things are, all those things are going to fall in place. And the good thing is that we have a lot of technologies that are on the sidelines waiting to fill the standards gaps, right?
Yeah.
So it's great. So the other thing that I think is really interesting about 5G as it relates to edge computing, and we'll move on to our second topic here, is MEC. Multi-access edge computing, and how, this is originally something that kind of came out of ITU and now there's IT or Etsy?
Etsy.
Yeah.
Etsy.
My bad. Yeah, Etsy.
Yeah.
I get those bodies mixed up sometimes. Maybe that's a
No, that's okay. But everyone was working on it together at Etsy.
Yeah, right. So
Etsy is similar to, has lots of people around it or in it that are providing the contributions. So that's where you came up. Yeah.
Right. And so we have this idea or concept of MEC, which is really the standards for multi-access. It used to be mobile, but now they decided, hey, why don't we just change it to multi-access, because it'll probably be for multiple access modalities, right? That it will support. And,
they didn't want to limit it. They didn't want to limit it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Which is smart, because when you look at a lot of these scenarios, you have to be able to transition between different access modes in certain instances. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting time, right? Because 3GPP jumped on board. There's a collaboration there. And then now all of a sudden, MEC is really is an integral part of the 5G standards and evolution.
Yeah, it's a real technology enabler. When you start to think, it's not the only one by any means, because when I do my presentations and keynotes now, I'm actually talking about even lots of things, whether it's multiple access computing, MEC, or edge computing, or artificial intelligence, or the cloud. All these things are starting to come together in a way that allows mobile operators to look at their toolkit and their kind of vendor partners and how to bring them together to really kind of, what I would say, is transform our lives. 5G Americas will be putting out a white paper soon that talks about the transformational nature of 5G and the things that it's incorporating. So that'll be coming out soon. And it really is something where there's a lot of technology capabilities that are in the standard, but also ones that are outside the standard that are helping this technology. And so it's a pretty cool time in our industry. But edge computing, artificial intelligence, the cloud, all these things are starting to really get looked at and be a part of many people's roadmaps for their technology strategies.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because MEC, while it's sort of the standard for how everyone should look at multi-access edge computing or edge computing, it's not necessarily intrinsically cloud native, right? Or cloud. Right. So you mentioned cloud coming in and being part of this transformation, or one of the drivers of the transformation is not intrinsically cloud native. What it is, we're seeing cloud technologies now being applied on top of virtualized environments, telco environments, whether it's in the edge or a central office. And now these cloud capabilities are changing the way that you can actually architect, deploy, manage your edge computing resources, right?
Yeah, we actually wrote a white paper on that as well, cloud native, because we actually felt that it wasn't actually getting enough information out to all the key stakeholders. So
by the way, I haven't read that one yet, so that's my next read.
Yeah, there we go. And it's from 2019. Pre-COVID white paper. Yeah. So in 2019, we felt that was an important subject, as the industry needed to understand what that meant, how it was going to be a part of our industry in the future, and how it is a tool in the toolkit of operators and they're working with their vendor partners. So there's a lot going on in this industry. We're in the middle of this pandemic, and at the same time, we're locked in, I think, as an industry about trying to move things forward, because we have a lot of innovative forces that we have, and a lot of tools, and we need to make sure that we're moving forward in that right direction, even despite this very difficult COVID-19.
Going back to MEC, I kind of look at it as the evolving standards for edge computing, especially as it pertains to network edge computing, and that includes mobile, right, and 5G. And then, you hear this term edge cloud is becoming more prominent nowadays. And that's really more of an implementation of a MEC, right? The standards, then the technologies, and then you actually have a cloud native instantiation of a MEC compliant cloudlet, as they call it. Oh, geez. Wow. All these buzzwords. This is horrible. Okay. And a cloudlet is basically a mini data center. It could be at a base station, it could be at a central branch office, right? And then you have this broader notion of a telco cloud, which is part of a broader transformation that telcos are going through. It's taking all of the software-defined networking stuff that's been kind of in vogue for the last more than a decade, and then now moving more toward a cloud native or cloud compliant or cloud-like model for operating. So, these microservice-based architectures, service-based architecture, the old SOA stuff, plus these cloud principles or, Kubernetes, right? Container-based applications. Those are now all coming into the CT world from the IT world, right? Yeah. Is that kind of how you see things, or you want to take me to school here and teach me how?
No. I wouldn't want to take Leonard Lee to school. There's no way. So no. I think that is a very good way to explain things. As you mentioned earlier, we have a white paper on Edge, so it does provide some good clarity on some of those things. But I think what you just described is very, very good. You A+.
I get it, A+. Awesome. Yeah. People really need to read that white paper. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we cleared that hurdle. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's talk about innovation. I know that the members of 5G Americas are pretty much the who's who of the vendor world as well as the operator world. Yeah. What are you seeing percolating up to the top in terms of innovation levers? I know you're giving a lot of talks around edge computing. What are you telling people about edge computing, 5G edge computing, and the drivers or enablers of innovation?
Just kind of reemphasize what I said earlier. I mean, we're in this innovation cycle, but we're in the early stages of it. If you look at really some of the economic forecasts, what 5G is going to do and how it's going to do it, and impact on GDP and service revenue growth and all that type of thing, it's because we're just in this beginning cycle of innovation. And many people will say, well, that's easy to say now. Let's see what happens looking, in 5 or 6 years, where are we? And that's true. I think the industry will have to look back and we'll get our scorecard in 5 or 6 years, because we're just in the beginning of probably lots of folks, really smart folks, whether you're a small company in your garage, medium size or large company, starting to realize that all these limitations that we've had in wireless in the past are starting to kind of be, it's kind of like when you're bowling and you got some pins in front of you, and slowly you're taking, those pins down. Hopefully, I know a good bowler does it in 1 shot or 2 shots, but it's like, you start to think about that, how, we're starting to, take down some of those limitations that we've had. And that's where 5G comes to play, but that's where innovation comes to play, because it's when the great minds, whether it's in our industry or out of our industry or in a garage, start to work on these things, that innovation starts, as you would say, percolating to the top. Mm-hmm. So I don't have any, billion-dollar killer app announcement today, or who's going to do it. But I would have to bet that there are going to be ways that we do things today, whether it's how we deal with transportation in a city, or how we deal with using power efficiently, or how do we deal with what would be considered your normal office space now? What does that mean post-COVID? I mean, there are going to be companies and people thinking about how do we do these things? So I'd say, since we're in this, second inning of the 9-inning game, I don't have any, again, billion-dollar service or app that I'll say, this is what it's going to be. But I do think that there's enough pins that are being knocked down that start people to think of, we used to be limited by that idea, because we couldn't we couldn't get a wireless connection at this speed or with this latency. But now you can start to do these things. So I think we're going to get there, but it's going to be a combination of lots of innovation that happens, not just like 1 or 2 things. And this is kind of really what happened with 3G and 4G.
Right.
people were looking for, in 3G, well, what was the one thing that's going to happen? And it was like, well, when someone puts the internet in my hand and I could interface with almost anything I wanted to, and it was easy, and the user interfaces for all these websites and applications and services was easy, it was kind of like, well, wow, this is cool. This smartphone is going to do me really good stuff in my life.
Right.
And it wasn't just for entertainment. It turned into the salesperson that was in the field, the insurance claims adjuster, you go down the list. Things just got more and more efficient in so many different ways. That can happen in 5G as well. I think there's some big issues that could get tackled because of it.
But we oftentimes get asked what's different about 5G, right?
Yeah.
And now it's also what's different about edge computing with 5G. From our research perspective, it really boils down to these URLLC or ultra reliable low latency applications. But traditionally though, the communication sector thinks in terms of downlink stuff.
Yeah.
Delivering content to the UE or the end user. They don't, but think about IoT. They talk about how 80% of all data is sitting out at the edge, whatever that means. But the thing is you want to get the data, it's got to go up, not down. And so there has to be this mindset change about how we think about the network, the carrier network. It's some of these really cool new applications are going to require that your network supports some pretty fat capability to suck data up somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's not like it's not going to be like a river. River goes one way. Yeah. But if you think about a tide goes in and out, right? Yeah. It's more like communications.
Exactly.
It's like you got to have some two-way communications capabilities that are fantastic to allow some of this computational interaction.
Yeah.
Because that's how you're going to use AI, and it's how you're going to use MEC. It's how you're going to use all these different things. And if you're just a river going one way, it's not enough. It's got to be more like tidal, an ocean where you have a tide that goes in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, and things like that. It's going to be two-way interaction that allows edge computing and AI and cloud native and all these things to kind of come together and mean something in a productivity sense to society.
I think that's probably what we can consider the new domain of innovation for 5G. The broadband stuff, you have more capacity. All right. You just put more stuff out there. You have a fatter pipe. You have more spectrum to work with. Fine. Yeah. But in terms of like a technical performance shift, I think it's really a lot of this ultra reliability for industrial use cases, as well as this ridiculous low latency for wireless communications, which is fantastic. I think that's what we can get excited about, and hopefully, we'll see how it goes. And like you said, we don't know where all the innovation is going to come from, but this is where at least we suspect the killer application is going to come from. Chris, let's move on to our last bullet item here, and what I'd like to ask you is what your sense is in terms of the direction that edge computing is taking in the marketplace.
Well, I think it's definitely something where our industry understands the importance of edge computing and what it can do as far as, again, this computational interaction and the need to have that on the edge. A lot of factors are coming into place, which would be, we've done great with, as you mentioned, ETSI, and now it's 3GPP, and the community of both operators and infrastructure providers all coming together. So I think it's a real positive outlook for edge computing as one of the key tools in the toolkit to really help us reach that promise of 5G. And there's a lot for us to do as an industry to reach that promise. And it deals with a lot of things we've already mentioned, but it also includes getting more spectrum out there, increasing our network density. So again, network density helps bring cell sites closer to the customer. Well, when you bring cell sites closer to the customer, then obviously you can have edge computing closer, because a lot of times those are at those cell sites. So there's a lot of positive forces, I think, when it comes to edge computing in our industry and even for our members.
Excellent. I'll agree with all of that. Especially, we have a lot of work ahead of us. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and listen to neXt to help you through it all.
Absolutely. Thank you for that plug. Appreciate it very much. So let me plug you back here. So, well, actually, before we do that, any last words that you want to give our audience today on this topic of edge computing?
No, I think we covered it. It's a great tool in the toolkit. There's a lot going on in our industry for technology enablers, and it definitely is something that's a technology enabler of 5G, and that 5G is helping enable because of the things that we're doing in our network architecture.
Awesome. And so I'm going to plug you back here. Tap into 5G America's vast library of white papers. There's papers that I haven't even read, and I have to read them. And they're great reads. They're comprehensive, not too long.
Yeah, comprehensive. Much better term.
Yeah, and I know that you guys have one on security as well, right? I got to read that up on that. So why don't you tell our audience where they can find this great material?
It's on our association website. It's all free. It's at www.5gamericas.org. So 5gamericas.org. Just look at our news or our white papers, or we do a lot of regulatory filings as well about spectrum and cell siting, things like that. So 5gamericas.org is pretty comprehensive for our white papers and other materials.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful source of information, and I highly encourage all of our listeners to go and check out the site. Really great stuff. So, Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And to our listeners and viewers, if you haven't already, please check out our research blog at www.next-curve.com. Also, subscribe to our YouTube and Apple podcast channels. Just search for NextCurve and it'll pop up. And Chris, it was great. It was really, really good to have you. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. And until next time, please be safe.
Sounds good. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Visit us at www.next-curve.com.